If you wish to see the completed film, become a patron, receive regular updates, and comment on the film as it's being made. As little as $1 enough a month to help, or send a one-time payment via PayPal. Links are in the description.
The story I'm about to bring up warrants a much larger documentary.
Journalist was a private Google group for journalists, founded in 2007 and closed in 2010 after it was exposed and criticised. This was a list of some 400 journalists, academics and others with a left-wing slant. There is nothing inherently wrong with that, and of course people with shared interests and shared careers talk all the time. The problem, as leaks from it exposed, was it being particularly nasty in its discussion and treatment of its ideological opponents.
What is necessary is to raise the cost on the right of going after the left. In other words, find a right-wingers and smash it through a plate glass window. Take a snapshot of the bleeding mess and send it out in a Christmas card to let the right know that it needs to live in a state of constant fear.
It was also exposed as being involved in a cross-party collaboration to promote US Democratic Party talking points and perspectives. The news still isn't supposed to be so brazenly partisan.
These conversations span newsrooms and universities. So when you have a narrative emerging, say that Gamergate was a harassment campaign, but these journalists behind the scenes are all hanging out with each other, sharing the same ideas and expressing the same opinions, of course all of these news outlets are probably going to put out similar narratives, that Gamergate was simply intending on harassing women.
All right, let me ask, so Lynn, you came into this knowing very little about Gamergate, on purpose did not want to get too educated about it. Ren, you knew a little bit more about it going in, so what's your thoughts on what you just saw?
Sure. Knowing what I know and hearing this, if I were you, I'd probably still be really confused. I don't think we've begun to scratch the surface of what any of this is actually about.
We had a new challenger approach. Milo Papadopoulos, famous television actor from Webster, and also body double for Phoenix Wright.
One of the main reasons Gamergate became erroneously connected with the right wing is down to the support and intervention of controversial right-wing and flamingly homosexual journalist Milo Yiannopoulos.
So first thing that I want to ask you about is I think I found out about you originally because of Gamergate.
We're all used to seeing these social justice warriors.
An army of sociopathic feminist programmers and campaigners are terrorizing the entire community, lying, bullying, and manipulating their way around the internet for profit and attention.
I think we're all used to now the press, in some cases, reporting on things extraordinarily badly.
As an outsider to this, when I read that, it seems to me very one-sided.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong intrinsically with being anti-feminist if you mean specifically by that you have no patience for the sort of shrieking misandrists that represent the modern feminist movement.
Now, Gamergate has been a huge controversy with people who care about these things because both of those things have come together.
I think that any normal person would, and I include myself in this, call themselves an equality feminist.
At the time, Milo was working for right-wing mouthpiece Breitbart, a tiresome online tabloid which, despite its turbo-Hitler rightward slant, does still occasionally produce some useful journalism and commentary.
Well, I wasn't previously a gamer. In fact, I'd said some relatively disobliging things about gamers in the past, but I kind of got sucked into this issue because I saw, if you like, a marginalized community, the gaming community, being accused of some things that it obviously had not done. And having its art form, having its hobby trashed by people who were obviously in it for ulterior motives.
Whatever else you might think of Milo, he certainly has a nose for controversy and appears to have seen multiple opportunities for himself, Breitbart, and the right wing in Gamergate.
This is the best example we have yet, the most exciting example culturally we have, and journalists have done such a terrible job of reporting on this, concentrating on these fake rape threats. Conservatives have missed the huge culture war opportunity here, shamefully so.
Now, Milo had hinted that something big was coming out. He had said, you guys aren't going to fucking believe this.
You know, this guy said, my ex-girlfriend was messing around with these people in the industry and it's unethical and all that.
Especially when you consider that the Gamers Are Dead article seemed to be a coordinated attack.
There's this hostility towards gamers in the gaming press and all this. Like, I don't even know how to begin to approach that as a reporter.
And to gamers, that looked like there was something going on. Like, there was a secret group coordinating what was happening.
It's like saying there's corruption in government. That's not something you can launch a story from. That's just an idea. You need a specific example.
Well, the bombshell hit. There was a secret group.
It then became also a story about collusion or industry-wide corruption, when a mailing list containing the editors and journalists at some of the biggest gaming publications was leaked, and the conversations were made public.
Journalist was the model for Game Journo Pros, the existence of which was first exposed by Milo Yiannopoulos on Breitbart, but confirmed by list member Kyle Orland.
And among the members, you will find prominent figures from nearly every video game journalism website. People like Jason Schreier, you remember Jason, who just a week before the article had come out had said, I don't want to cover the fine young capitalist. There's no reason to do it. I don't see a story here.
On one side, you can say that, look, it's just the people who are like-minded sharing space, and this is what happens. From another side, you could say that they should separate themselves because we need a diversity of thought when it comes to the political landscape. But all of that gets pushed aside when we learn the journalist, the cabal, never went away.
Game Journo Pros wasn't as important, of course, being limited to games journalism, but about Gamergate's issues it would prove to be incredibly important. Discussion on the list included talk about using the controversy around Zoe Quinn and ethical issues to give her game more exposure.
People like Ben Kuchera would yell at others and tell them that he was going to stop talking to him at that exact moment because he wanted to remain civil.
It also contained pressure to censor discussion of the issue on site fora.
Greg Tito of The Escapist was on this particular group, and he had said, we have a conversation going on at The Escapist. I don't necessarily agree with what's being said, but I don't see a problem with it. And he was bombarded for daring to allow open conversation.
It also exposed close links with PR firms and numerous other ethically grey, if not necessarily ethically black, actions.
Ryan Smith had mentioned, why is it that we cover one sort of topic but we won't cover the other? And he was bombarded with hate for even asking that question.
This confirmed what many had suspected, that there was collusion, that people were working to create a narrative, and that it was a conspiracy of sorts. The corruption and nepotism that triggered Gamergate was at a whole new level of hypocrisy, however, especially coming from journalists who had previously decried the existing state of corruption.
And who doesn't want to run underneath that plane?
This was more personal, this was petty, and this was politicized. People who had presumed to tell gamers that they were better than them were proven to be anything but. Hypocrisy is all but guaranteed to whip people up.
His name is Saul Alinsky, and there are still many to whom the name is meaningless.
Who the fuck is Saul Alinsky?
Do you know who Saul Alinsky was?
I don't.
Wasn't he a member of the Weather Underground?
Not quite.
Alinsky was a Jewish American who was born in 1909 to Russian immigrant parents and died in 1972.
He is one of the few men who appears to be absolutely fearless, especially when it comes to the constant threats he receives by telephone and in the mail.
By profession, he was a writer, activist, and community organizer, meaning that he spent a great deal of his time helping people get what they want from power structures that had no interest in giving these things up.
All the stuff that goes up, that there's always some kooky crackpot who will say, you know, I'll get national headlines if I knock him off, which he will, you know.
Alinsky wrote Rules for Radicals at the end of his life. It is Alinsky's power tactics for which Rules for Radicals is most famous.
Frustration and exasperation had been growing for some time, and they had seen how Twitter mobs and social justice warriors often applied pressure to companies with shaming tactics, boycotts, letters to advertisers, and bad media publicity.
Word is coming out right now that Nick Denton has been astroturfing Gamergate.
Power is not only what you have, but what the enemy thinks you have.
There has been a group of individuals eager to ruin my business endeavors at every turn for the sake of ethics.
Gamergate successfully adopted enemy tactics, ferociously attacking the journalists who had ethical failings, digging up information on them, finding their conflicts of interest, and exposing them.
Let me translate that. Boo-hoo, I was caught behaving inappropriately with the subjects of my writing.
They also took the Gamers Are Dead sites to task, as well as other sites that attacked their subculture and customer base.
Never go outside the experience of your people.
And if you've been paying attention in the past few weeks, you've seen that with a lot of these guys, no matter what we do or say, refuse to take a closer look at the movement that's happening in front of them. For a lot of these journalists, it's a lot like asking a truck driver to be a better dentist. So it puts us kind of in a position where we're left with no other choice but to start notifying their advertisers that maybe these press outlets aren't the best place to be putting their ads. In the details for this video, I've put links to a list of advertisers for a few press outlets. I've also put a few articles down there that you can choose to link these ad agencies or PR firms to. And additionally, there's also a list of unknowns. We still need email addresses for these places, so please do some internet detective work and help us out. We've received tips from people who work in this field suggesting that personalized letters have the most impact. However, there is some generalized language you can use. I'd suggest that somewhere in the letter you apologize if the email hasn't been sent to the correct department and kindly request that it could be forwarded to the correct person if at all possible. You also want to make it clear that you care about the product, but that you can't continue to be a consumer if they're going to support actions like the ones the press outlet you're writing about has taken.
Wherever possible, go outside the experience of the enemy.
You cannot simply attack their leader when they have none, nor could you shun the group as a whole without them using their Rainbow Coalition to mitigate any claims.
Some might consider this hypocritical and censoring, but it was turning the enemy's tactics against them and holding them to their own standards. Alinsky Rule 4.
Make the enemy live up to their own book of rules.
In protesting what Gamergate was doing and decrying it as censorship, their opposition only succeeded in exposing themselves as hypocrites. They could hardly complain about people mobilizing in exactly the same way they had used themselves to push their agenda.
Ridicule is man's most potent weapon.
Its involvement in the initial controversies made Kotaku, Gawker, a prime target for Gamergate, and the main site to be targeted and harmed by Operation Disrespectful Nod.
A good tactic is one that your people enjoy.
Gamergate's detractors have cited the attacks on Gawker and Kotaku via their advertisers as a case of hypocrisy by Gamergate regarding its anti-censorship position. While there were ethical issues on other sites that were targeted, some of them were relatively minor. Unlike those, Kotaku tended to make excuses for behaviour such as Grayson's and had to be forced harder to introduce ethical standards.
A tactic that drags on too long becomes a drag.
As a part of Gawker, they were also tied up into illegal activity, as well as ethical breaches.
Take, for example, the time that Gawker ruined an interactive advertising campaign by Coca-Cola. You could go on Twitter, tweet something at the Twitter bot that would then take what you had said and turn it into a nice, happy picture. Quite amusingly, Gawker set up a bot to tweet sections of Mein Kampf at the Coca-Cola bot, making it produce make-it-happy tweets that revolved around white supremacy. This became a problem to the point where Coca-Cola suspended the campaign.
In these cases, it's not really what is being said, and not so much a free speech issue, but a moral, ethical, and legal failing, against which sanction would seem to be more justified.
Keep the pressure on.
Identify yourself any way you want and say whatever you want, briefly.
My name is Paulo Munoz. I am known as Game Diviner on YouTube and on Twitter.
So I had someone send out feelers looking for people to work on a special project for me. Those that made it through screening have been taking part in an effort to police the group from the inside, causing a wedge to be driven amongst them.
I know you put Kotaku and ethics in one sentence as a mockery of what Gawker is, but I want to remind you of one thing. Gawker destroys lives.
The media parade that has been going on for weeks now hasn't done anything worth a damn. Time and effort thrown out the window with needless articles over this shit show.
The threat is usually more terrifying than the thing itself.
There's a big reason why many of us in Gamergate are anonymous, because Gawker will destroy people. Take the example of Justine Scavo, I believe her last name is that. Justine Sacco. She was one woman who made one wrong tweet, and the man who destroyed her life, Sam Biddle.
Now, who the fuck is Sam Biddle, you might be wondering? Sam Biddle works at Gawker Media. In fact, he's an editor at Gawker Media.
Gawker journalist Sam Biddle tweeted out the following in 2 posts during the dust-up. Ultimately, Gamergate is reaffirming what we've known to be true for decades. Nerds should be constantly shamed and degraded into submission. Bring back bullying.
Bring back bullying. And the extra tweet beneath it. Yeah, that's real good. Except that's redundant, Sam, because we already knew that that's what your side was all about.
The major premise for tactics is the development of operations that will maintain a constant pressure on the opposition.
Nick Denton himself has said we have cost him 7 figures of money on advertising revenue. Do you think any one of us here wants to put our face to that? When Gawker is willing to put out hundreds of people's private citizens put out their addresses because they own a gun in New York City.
It feels good, and I am proud of myself. I am slaying a giant, and there is nothing they can do about it.
This public display of bias and hatred was bad enough, but Biddle turned out to be advocating bullying and harassment during National Bully Prevention Awareness Month.
We are scared to put our faces out here, and people here who are in Gamergate are putting our faces out here because we believe in this. And this is Gawker's power. Gawker is not just unethical. Gawker is willing to destroy private people's lives, and by putting my face here, I put my family in danger. But I'm willing to be here because I believe in gamers.
And it will continue to be the dagger that kills the silly group of entitled brats. Signed, Nick Denton.
It was a spectacular own goal in a huge number of ways, displaying the very alleged behaviour that they had been criticising Gamergate for.
If you push a negative hard and deep enough, it will break through to its counterside.
I believe they are good people, and I believe we have been mislabeled this entire time. So please do not dismiss this by saying Gawker shouldn't be unethical. So thank you very much, Mr. LaForme, for being here.
No, thank you for standing up and saying that clearly.
In response, Gamergate donated over $16,000 to an anti-bullying charity, and not long after instituted the Gamergate Harassment Patrol. This took an internal stand against trolling, doxing and harassment, getting a huge number of such accounts banned, amongst other accomplishments. This was, of course, barely reported.
The price of a successful attack is a constructive alternative.
I'm not saying that Gawker is not a thing that has some power and sway. I think they should be held to a higher standard, and if they want to get some help with ethics, I'm sure that Pointer SBJ would love to help them. I mean, honestly.
If I can say something really quick, Trent. I actually don't mind if Gawker wants to write horrible things. If Tucker wants to write horrible things, it's the fact that they have that reach. That's my. And then if we want to say they're not accountable, then we need to make sure the people who spread the information, the people at the New Yorker, are the ones who will uphold that higher standard.
I mean, there are two alternatives. First, Google can improve their standards, or people can just stop believing them. I mean, either one will work.
And finally, pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it.
I do want to do this. We only got a couple of minutes left.